So in today's video, I'm going to do a wax that is going to be similar to this one here. Now, although this is silver, it could be cast in platinum, gold, titanium, regardless. So I start off in my lathe. I'm going to cut the inside first. My wax starts off as a pretty significant piece. Here it is here, 2 inches around, and I cut it down on my larger lathe so that it fits into my wax lathe. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the interior, and the size that I'm going to cut the interior is based on my ring size. So I already know the interior diameter of my finished ring, and so I'm going to cut the interior of this tube to match my ring size. Now you can see here I'm cutting it quite a bit off at any given time, and that's because it's wax, and it has no structure internally, so there's no flaws, there's no grain, there's nothing like that to worry about, so it almost never catches on my tool. As I get closer, I'll take less and less off, and until finally I do a final pass, and I will stop the machine and just check it with my calipers to make sure that it's the correct size. So the calipers, I use the back of them, and they get put inside the wax and opened up all the way, and then I just check it to make sure it's the right size, and looks good. Now I'm going to start working on the exterior of the ring, and to do that I'm going to switch tools to my cutoff tool, and on this one there's quite a large piece of material on the left side of the wax there that you can see. I'm going to remove some of that, and that's just so that my tool doesn't bottom out when I go to do my final cut. Now there's a fair bit of material here that needs to be removed, so you can see how much I'm removing at any given time. I'm removing somewhere around 1 millimeter of material, and I probably would remove less if I was working in any other material, but the wax is very stable and cuts very well. So now at this point I'm starting to remove the wax to the hole for the ring blank, and right here I've probably got 2 to 3 millimeters to go before I'm at my finished. So you can see that I'm cutting both in the forward and the reverse cut. I only do that because I'm using the jeweler's wax. Any other thing I would not do that. And it's just saves a little bit of time. So as I get closer and closer to my final cut, I will cut the final cut using the lead screw. So the lead screw, when it's engaged, moves the tool at a given speed, and it gives a smoother finish, which is kind of important when you're doing your final product. So here we go. I'm going to just cut it one more time, and this time I'm going to go across it with engaging the lead screw. So you can see right here the difference between that first section and the speed of this section. So the first section I did manually, and the second section I did with the lead screw, so you can see the difference. Now I'm going to cut it off. So at this point I'm actually driving the tool forward on my tool post, and that's going to give me a cutoff line. Unfortunately, when I did this, I misjudged the depth of my cut on the interior. Normally I overcut it, but I didn't this time, so I have to go back in from the interior and cut it so that I have basically a cylinder, the thickness and size that I want. I'm going to engage the lead screw here. You can see it slowly going forward. Once it gets to that previous cut line on the left side of the wax, it's going to fall off right there. Turn the lathe off, and then back the tool out, and there's my blank. So that's now ready to take over to my bench and create the ring. So these are some of the tools that I'll be using to do this. Now I should also have a file and a few other tools with me, like dividers, but I'm going to freehand it for today. So these are gravers, an inside ring grinder, scriber, and the final tool is a scalpel. So you have to be very careful with all these tools because they're sharp. One of the first things I'm going to do is, because I'm going to put a stone in the center of this, I'm going to mark that out so that I have a rough idea when I'm designing it, and I'm freehanding this whole piece. So it's my flex shaft, and this is just a ball bearer that I'm putting in here for now. And you can see here that I'm going to just center it, and like I said, I'm freehanding these. I do them one at a time. There we go. And this is just, like I said, a target for me to hit. So you can see there's a nice little circular divot there, and that's going to let me draw my lines around it. Once I've done that, I'm going to put in my inside ring grinder. I don't need that quite yet, but while I have the flex shaft in my hand, I like to make sure that I'm ready to go. So I'm going to start on the back, and I'm going to draw a few lines, and these are just layout lines. I could use dividers here if I wanted to be more accurate, but in this particular case, it doesn't really matter. And I'm going in from both sides so that I know that everything is nice and even. Once I've done the rough layout lines, I like to start off and not go too deeply, and I'm going all the way around just so I kind of know where they line up. And these are just there to give me a rough idea of where my design is going and where I'm targeting my carving. Otherwise, what will happen is I'll get confused and it won't look as good. So I draw all my layout lines. I like to go all the way around with them. They don't have to be perfect, but they need to be fairly precise. And once I've started my layout lines and I've got them all into position, now I can start taking the lines and actually drawing them in a variety of directions. So I can start forming the actual shank. So I'm going to start by, I don't know, taking this one wire on the right, and I'm going to turn it off to the right side, and then have it come around and go all the way around the stone. And you can see I'm going across the other wires, and that's intentional. I want to have some overlapping going on because I like the look of it. And then I'm just drawing the other side of that one wire, and there we go. And I keep doing that until I work on the other side a little bit. And I freeform these so they are what they are. So if you like my Wax Carving Wednesday and you happen to be in the mood for a new ring, feel free to comment and ask. I can give you a price on whatever material you want this wax to be in. And all my Wax Carving Wednesdays will be for sale. And you can have whatever stones you want in them. Feel free to ask for a price, and I'd be happy to offer. So here I am. I'm just working on my overall design, doing some overlaps and laying it out. And again, I'm not doing it very deeply to start, just in case I change my mind, which sometimes happens. And the lines that I started off with in the beginning are my start points, and they have to join in together so that I have 3 lines all in place. And it could be 5 lines, it could be 4 lines, it could be whatever really it matters, like whatever you really want. And so in this case, I'm doing some overlaps. And, I like to keep them interesting and natural looking. There's supposed to be vines intertwining, so I kind of like to think about that as I go. And as I continue on, I start thinking about making my lines a little bit deeper. And so what I'm going to use is I'm going to use my graver. First, I'm going to actually remove the exterior material. Now, I'm going to use a rotary file for this, which is what's in my flex shaft right now. But you could also use, a file, you could use your saw frame. I use the rotary file because it's quicker, and for videos like this, it's important to have my videos not be excessively long. So just trying to make sure I don't get confused here while I'm doing my cutting. It's super important that I don't accidentally remove some material. I can always fix it, but it's better for the final product if I don't have to fix the wax. So there we go, and I'm just going to finish tightening this up to the line. So now I'm carving directly to that initial layout line that I did, and this vertical cut is so that I can get into the corners a little bit tighter, where usually it means there's an overlap. And keep going. Now I generally like to do the edge not with the rotary file because it's difficult to get it nice and even, and normally I'd go over it with a file, but my files aren't easily had at the moment because I'm using my wax drawer. And now I'm going to do the other side. As you can see that it's starting to take a little bit of form on the outside. And the process seems pretty quick, but you know, I've been carving wax for nearly 30 years and I've gotten good at it over time. And again, this is where I would like to use a file just to square it up a little bit. So I'm following that initial line that I made around the outside of the ring, and I'm going to go in and cut that little line there. I'm going to use my saw frame for this one. And it just lets me get in nice and tight to the corner there on both sides. And if I had more offcuts, I would, I'd possibly use my saw frame more. All depends on the situation. Now I'm going to make sure that, now that I have my layout, I want to make sure that I put some, drill some holes and get rid of the negative spaces. It really helps define the direction of the piece without cutting away the negative spaces and getting the outline. It's very difficult to not lose your locations, and you can make mistakes easily in this. So drilling out the holes and getting the negative space removed is a good idea. So I'm going to start off, and normally I would do this with my scalpel or my graver. Sometimes I'll do it with my saw frame, but in this case I'm going to start off with my graver, and I'm just making my lines and sharpening the edges so that my lines are more distinct. I'm basically reinforcing my layout lines at this point, and that just helps me not make any mistakes. And control with the graver is a good idea. You don't want to slip and have the graver push into your thumb or something like that. We've all pretty much had that happen, and even somebody that has years of experience can still have that happen. So you need to be careful with the graver as you're going. And you can see how I'm holding this wax. It's very important that I support the wax as I carve it. I don't want to push down on it. I don't want to risk breaking it, and as things get more delicate, it increases the chances of breaking, so supporting it as much as possible is a good idea. So here we go. You can see I'm laying out all the lines and the crisscrossing, and this is really where, when I have a piece that crisscrosses another one, like on the side here, I want to accentuate that again so that I make sure that the other pieces go underneath it and whatnot. Looking good. So I'm just going to pull that in just a little bit there. And now that I've made the overall lines, I've defined them more. You can see how much easier it is to see the actual ring design and how it's developing. Otherwise, you'll see only a little bit of it, and it just helps to define the piece. So here, this is where I'm going underneath the other one, so I got to make sure I stop and then continue on the other side. Good. Okay, now my line work is pretty much done. A little bit right there. And so I've got a hole in there, and I'm just going to cut a little triangle, pop that out, cut another little bit. And so I keep working this until that one little hole gets large enough that the whole scalpel can fit through. And once it can do that, I can use the scalpel to cut the inside. Now this is a very, very sharp scalpel, so you want to make sure that you don't cut your fingers or anything like that, or you don't break your blade. So don't cut off too much at any given time. Make sure that you're just shaving the edge with the scalpel, and just keep going. It gives you a pretty smooth interior look there. And if you've watched my other video on sanding this type of ring, you can do that. Now I'm going to start this one off, and this is quite a bit of material to be removing with the scalpel. This could take quite a while. So what I'm going to do is go to back to my flex shaft in a minute, because this center area is quite large, and it would be advantageous to remove that material with my flex shaft. It'll be a little bit quicker. The scalpel is nice because it gets right into the corners. And you can see how I'm cutting in both directions. You will find it easier in one direction or another, but all depends on your experience. Like I said, I've been carving wax for quite a long time. Although I am known for my cuttlefish casting, I'm a traditionally trained goldsmith, so I find carving wax as much fun as carving a cuttlebone mold. And that's why you will see some of my pieces use both wax carving and cuttlefish casting or fabrication, because I am traditionally trained. So here I'm putting in a smaller rotary file to get into the center, and I'm just going to clean that out. It's generally quicker, but you have to be much more careful with these sort of things. It's easy to make a mistake when you're removing a lot of material. You can see how I'm holding the flex shaft quite sturdily. I'm supporting my hands as I'm working. My hands are on my bench peg. Try not to, free float your hands where they're not touching anything and they're not supported. It just makes everything easier. Now that I've got the majority of the material away, I can go in with my scalpel and clean up that interior edge just like before. And this next little bit is a bit tricky because I'm doing curves and corners, and so I have to sort of try to be fluid in my motions, and that'll make my lines fluid as well. And once I've gotten all the way done here, I will go back and go back in with my graver and do a little bit more work in a moment. But first, I want to expose this area and just a little bit of a corner there. Get that little edge off. It's these little details like that that help define the design a bit more. And you can see the crisscrossing and all of that. So I'm going to start by bringing this underneath. So I'm going to round this first. It's going to be 3 ribs at the back, so I'm going to round one of them. And it doesn't really matter which one, but I do need to go around and do all 3 of them. The nice thing about these, as opposed to fabricating a ring like this, is the wire on the inside is round, whereas this is flat. It's actually a more comfortable ring than a fabricated one. But there's something to be said about the fabricated ones as well. So you just slowly remove material and rounding the top edge. I'm just going to try to get right into that corner. Just a little bit there. And I'm cutting that low. I want this particular one to look like it's going underneath the others. So I've actually tapered that wire a little bit as it comes to the top of the ring. And that just helps make the ring more interesting in general. And you can see how I'm cutting it at an angle. And that just helps with the overall roundness. And just keep going with that. I'm going to flip the ring over in a second. And do other side, once I'm happy with this side, of course. I could file that as well. And this just cuts the little crotch between the 2 lines a bit more, bringing it up. Just trying to smooth out the fluidity of the line, the motion of the line. And so I'm scraping it with the side and just pulling a very little wax off at a time. Now I'm going over to the next rib and I'm doing the same thing where I chamfer the edge of the cut, and that helps round the whole thing and causes it to look like it's going to be half round in the end. So now I'm going to cut this so that it's going underneath the other one. So there's the one that turns almost 90 degrees. It is over top of this one, so I want to cut it so that it looks like it's going, well, the one is going over top of the other. And I'm going to do that on both of them. So that on both sides, I should say. So I'm just going to get a tiny little bit of a hole right here. And again, this is to define the different ribs that are coming around from the back. If I don't do this sort of tiny little definition holes and stuff like that, the whole piece starts to look like a little bit more like one piece. You can see how cathartic carving wax can be, you know. And I'm just going to round this one as well. All of these are supposed to be half round wires when I'm done, so I kind of work on them as I go. Try to keep them as smooth as possible. The smoother my wax is at this stage, the less cleanup I'll have after it's cast. So I really want to keep this as clean and smooth as possible. Otherwise, I will be removing material after I cast it, and that could be a pain, especially if it's gold or platinum. I'd be wasting material. And again, notice my grip is a very supportive grip where I'm holding on to the wax and giving it support all the way around and on both sides as I go. If I don't give it that support and I don't hold it properly, I will increase the risk that I'll break the wax, which I kind of want to avoid because, like I said earlier, a broken wax, although it's repairable, can cause some small casting flaws, could overall be more work in the end. So the less work, the better. So I'm just trimming this one down. Again, this is coming underneath. So it has to go under there and then back up. So this is lower, so I'm just going to lower the whole thing and then reassert the, oops, sorry, need a little drill bit here. Nope, that one's too big. Try again. Here we go. And I'm just going to drill this by hand. I'm just twisting it in my fingers. That gets me a tiny little hole, just enough for my scalpel to go into. And again, this is to help give it more form and more definition, which is super important. So again, if you're interested in purchasing this ring when it's finished, and you would want it, if you want it in a certain material, feel free to DM me. You can direct message me, or you can email me, tony@aboutfacejewelry.com, and I can talk to you about different materials that it can be cast in, and the cost of having it done. And of course, size. I need to know size for these sort of things. Each week I'll be carving a different wax. I will not be finishing these waxes until I have to, because if somebody wants it cast in silver, that's a different process than casting it in platinum. So I will be selling these waxes, and I'll finish them as they get sold, and then I will show people them when they're finished. So in this case, because there is going to be a stone, you can also request a particular stone to go into it. And so I'm just finishing up rounding these 3 ribs. You can see how they're much rounder than they were before. And it's best to take your time with this part so that you're not gouging and doing anything like that. I will post a couple pictures of the finished wax as well, with better lighting so that you can see it before you decide. And I might even post what it will be worth in different materials so that you can decide what you want. And of course, when I'm talking about stones, oh look, I think I don't want this little piece here. So I just cut that off. That's much better. And then I clean it up. So if you decide that you don't want a faceted stone in there, that's up to you. If you want a cab or an opal or a particular type of stone, you just feel free to ask when you inquire about this ring. And this will be wax ring from October 5th. And that's how I'm going to label these, is by date. I won't be doing rings every week. Some weeks I'll be doing different things, depending on what I have on my list of things to do. I am kind of low on stock for this type of ring, so I will be doing a few different versions of this, simply because I need to replace my personal stock as well. So again, I'm just cleaning up each little piece and making sure that it flows properly. And remembering that once this is done, I've got to be able to get into here with my flex shaft and clean it up as well. And that's a big part of when you're putting something together like this, is how am I going to polish this? Is the polisher going to get in here properly? And all of that sort of stuff. Yeah, there we go. So right here in that middle section, I have a little bit of a problem, and I'm going to have to add a bit of wax, but I'll do that after. And you can see it's curving nicely. Nice half rounds there all the way around. Once I've got a good feel for the outside, I'm going to go on the inside. And most of my rings are semi-comfort or full comfort, and that just means that I've taken the inside and I've rounded it. So here I go, I'm going to round the inside. Oh, sorry, I'm still on the outside edge. I'm just flattening the outside edge a little bit. And once I'm done this, I will go to the inside and do the inside edge. Here we go. Now for the inside edge, I'm just taking the corner off, and that just makes it more comfortable. This is a semi-comfort shank, and I go all the way around so that there's no sharp edges on the inside either. It just makes it fit on your finger nicer and makes it overall much more comfortable. And I have to do this on both sides. Of course, 'cause it would be silly to do it only on one side. And there we go. To try to make sure that you don't notch it. So again, long fluid motions with your cutting tool. And again, I could do this after the fact. However, if I do it after, I'm going to be removing silver or gold, and that's just wasteful. So the more I can get done in the wax, the better, so long as I don't break the wax. So here I am, I've got I'm just getting my saw frame ready, and I'm putting the wax in the saw frame, and I'm using the saw blade to cut tiny little, opening up these holes a little bit, just because I can't get in there very well with the tip of my scalpel. And the saw blade is just overall a finer tool for this. And I will also use the saw as the final cleanup as well when I'm going in to clean it up. So I'll sand it using the saw. I'll use the saw blade to file it, the edge of the saw blade to file it, and then I will file it or sand it with the saw as well. Similar to what I did in my other video my other YouTube video of sanding rings. So here we go. This is basically what it looks like, and my intention was for a stone to go in the middle, so I'm going to have probably a bezel of some sort. I generally don't use claws because I don't like them, but that'll go in there like that, and you can see how lovely that looks. Not too high off your finger. A little small for my big hands, but still super cute. So if you like it, let me know. Thanks for watching.